Welcome back to another video of Story Time with Christopher. Today we're going to read Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt, Chapter 1. So get your books ready. Let's start. The road that led to the tree gap had been trod out long before a herd of cows who were to stay at least relax. It wandered along its curves and easy angles, swayed off and up in a pleasant tangent to the top of a small hill, ambled down again between fringes of the bee-hung clover, and then cut sideways across a meadow. Here's edges grey. It winded and seemed to pause, suggesting trickle bovine picnics, slowing chewing and thoughtful communion of the infinite. And then it went on again, and came at the last of to the woods. But on reaching the shadows of the first trees, it varied sharply, swung out in a wide arc, as if for the first time had a reason to think where it was going, and passed around. On the other side of the wood, the sense of the easiness dissolved. The road no longer belonged to the cows, became a stand and rather abruptly the property of people. And all at once the sun was uncomfortably hot, the dust oppressive, and the meager grass along its edges somewhat ragged and forlorn. On the left stood the first house, a square and solid cottage, with not touch me not appearance, surrounded by grass cut painfully to the quick and enclosed by a capital iron fence, some 4 feet high, which is Kelly said, "Move on, we don't want you here." So the road went humbly by, and it made its way past cottages, more and more friend, but less and less forbidden, into the village. But the village doesn't matter except for the jailhouse and the gallows. The first house is only important. The first house, the road, and the wood. There is something strange about the wood. If the look of the first house suggests that you better pass it by, so did the look of the wood, but for quite a different reason. The house was so proud of itself that it wanted to make a lot of noise as you passed, and maybe even throw a rock or two, but the wood had a sleeping, other-world appearance that made you want to speak in whispers. This, at last, is what the cows must have taught. Let's keep it in peace. We won't disturb it. Whenever the people felt the way about the wood, or not, is it difficult to say. There were some, perhaps, who did. But for the most part, people followed the road around the wood. That was the way it led. There was no road through the wood. And anyway, for the people, there were another reason to leave the wood by itself. It belonged to the Fosters, the owners of the Touch Me Not cottage, and it was therefore private property, in spite of the fact that it lay outside the fence, and it was perfectly assembled. The ownership of land is an odd thing when you come to think of it. How deep, after all, can it go? If a person owns a piece of land, does he own all the way down? In ever narrowing dimensions, till it meets another piece of the center of earth? Or does ownership consist only of a thin crust under which the friendly worms had never heard of trespassing? In any case, the wood being on top, except, of course, for its roots, was owned, bud and buff, by the Fosters in the Touch Me Not cottage, and if they never went there, it's never wandered in among the trees. Well, that was their affair. Winnie, the only child of the house, never went there, though she sometimes stood inside the fence, carelessly banging a stick against the iron bars, and looked at it, but she had never been curiously curious about it. Nothing ever seems interesting when it belongs to you, only when it doesn't. And what is interesting anyway, but about a slim view across the trees? there will be demosness shot through with bars of sunlight, a great many squirrels and birds, a deep damp matters of leaves on the ground, and all the other things just are as familiar, if not so pleasant things like spiders, thorns, and grubs. In the end, however, it was the cows who were responsible for the woods and solution. And the cows, through some wisdom, they were not wise enough to know that they were possessed. Very were very wise indeed if they had made it their road through the wood instead of round it. Then the people would not have followed the road. The people would notice the giant ash tree at the center of the wood, and then in time they have noticed this little spring bubbling up among its roots in the spite of the pebbles piled there to console it. And the world that would have been a disaster so immense that this very old earth, owned or not to its very core, would have turned on its axis like a beetle on a pin. Thank you for reading with me. Next video, we're going to read Chapter 2 by Chuck Everlasting. Chapter 2 of Chuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. I'll see you next video. Woo woo!